Well, the Super Bowl is only a couple of days away, so that got us to wondering how close are the Chargers to being Super Bowl contenders?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers for over 6 seasons, and we're heading into our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. What's up, guys? Welcome into the show. Thank you for making us your first listen, as always, and also make sure to go subscribe to the new Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and also follow the show wherever you get your podcast from. But, David, today we wanted to get into the big topic of the day with the Super Bowl only a couple of days away. We were thinking, how close are the Chargers to being in Super Bowl contention? One thing is for sure, they have the quarterback, and that's a big part of it. But there's obviously a lot that's going to be determined by what happens during this offseason. So we will also be getting into if the trenches or a skill position player is more important for the Chargers in the draft, what the Chargers can do to get Justin Herbert throwing more deep passes, and much more in today's Fan Mail Friday as well. But today's episode is brought to you by Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app and use the promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. All right, David, well, we wanted to have some fun with the Super Bowl, and we were honestly kind of just, talking about it like, how close are the Chargers to being a Super Bowl contender? And I think one thing that the Bengals showed this year, too, is obviously, first thing is making it to the dance. You know what I mean? Because the Bengals were not a prohibitive Super Bowl favorite when they got to the playoffs. I mean, almost lost pretty much every game along the way, right? But you just have to make it there first. Chargers are very close to that. And so much of it is going to have to depend on what the Chargers do to surround Justin Herbert. But I think the biggest part of it, David, the one thing that makes you feel like the Chargers are closer than they've been in a long time is just who they have at quarterback. Because the dude's eclipsing Phillip Rivers seasons, right? He's elite already at such a young age.
2 seasons in.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody else that's ever been 2 seasons in comparatively. I mean, he leads every statistical category in that regard. But
Crazy.
that is a big part of it, David. So I think that's step number one. You can check that box off because you definitely don't feel like Justin Herbert is holding the Chargers back at all from getting to the Super Bowl.
There's 30 teams in the NFL that would probably trade for Justin Herbert, even guys that have quarterbacks in place because of his age, his arm talent, his intelligence, his stage presence, everything. He is the total package. There's no one in the NFL that wouldn't want to have a guy of that talent.
There may be like 5 teams I think would not trade for Justin Herbert. Maybe.
Right. And that's a maybe too. It's just Justin Herbert is super, super special. And the fact that the Chargers know this already, have him on a rookie contract, have their left tackle in place as well to protect Justin Herbert. These guys are kind of going to be their Batman and Robin for the next 10, 15 years, hopefully. And of course, the Chargers have a slew of offensive weapons around Justin Herbert, but I don't think that they're quite there on offense. There's definitely some things they need to add on both sides of the ball to get them to be a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I mean, I think their offense wasn't consistent enough, or at least it didn't show up well enough against the really good teams, I think, and especially the good defenses. But I think offensively they have enough. Like, they have enough to make it to a Super Bowl. They just don't have enough to carry a bad defense and special teams unit to a Super Bowl. Because, I mean, they were a top 5 offense last year. You can get into the playoffs. You can get into the Super Bowl with a top 5 offense if you have at least an average defense, and the Chargers were far from that. But I think the one thing that we learned is unless Justin Herbert was playing at an MVP level, the Chargers just weren't playing games or winning games. And even some of the games he was playing at an MVP level, they lost those games anyways, because all but one of their losses came with the other team scoring 27 points. So I think it's needless to say, David, that a lot of things are going to have to change specifically on the defensive side. Yeah, there's pieces that you need on offense, but you feel like the core is still intact, especially if you bring back Mike Williams. I mean, the rest of those guys that you're going into free agency were not huge key contributors. Maybe Jared Cook, someone like that. But for the most part, no. So when you look at this, David, I mean, it's the 27th ranked defense that has to improve a lot. So I just don't think we're even talking about a Super Bowl. I don't know if you can talk about the Chargers being a Super Bowl contender or being close to a Super Bowl team unless that defense improves dramatically.
Yeah, and then they really need to add, talent and depth at almost every level of the defense too. And I think, we came into this season maybe giving Brandon Staley's credentials and what he put put out there on tape a little bit too much prestige value, because he comes in here, tries with a new team with new pieces, a couple of stars, right? But he didn't have everyone that he needed to kind of put his defense out there the best way he wanted to, and obviously that showed up in the numbers and where they were placed. So I think the first thing, just on the roadmap of fixing the defense, and we all know this, we've talked about it at nauseum, is correcting the defensive line and adding the talent and stopping the run and getting more pass rush on the interior of that defensive line too. I think that's really the most important thing, because if you stop the run and you get that pass rush, everyone's job on the back end behind them is much, much easier. You got somebody to clog open the middle, then your linebackers can roam free. You're getting pressure on the quarterback, then your coverage guys don't have to cover as long, and you pressure them into making mistakes, which gives you interceptions and turnovers, which gets you the ball back to one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So fixing the defensive line is the most important thing for me, for the Chargers to get started on the road to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, it's up there for sure. I think there's arguments for a couple of different things as their biggest need, but I do think the group that needs the biggest overall has to be the defensive side of
Oh
things.
yeah.
And there's a lot of guys that could potentially be moving on. So that's another thing that we'll have to see who they bring back, because how many guys are you going to bring back on a defense that was as bad as it was, right? Because
Yeah.
last season we saw the Chargers move on from struggling players like Forrest Lamp and Dan
Yep.
Feeney and Sam Tevy, and end up going, and really just replacing a ton of dudes on offense and really overhauling that unit. Could we see that again on the defensive side of things? Because the thing is you can have a really good offense and win with a bad defense. I mean, the Chiefs didn't have a good defense the 2 years they were last in the Super Bowl, one Super Bowl win, and obviously another appearance in it when they lost to the Buccaneers. But you better have a legendary offense, right? Because
Yeah.
that's something different. Like, you have to be like a historic offense for the most part to just totally disregard the defensive side of things. But I think, as we've seen in the ebbs and flows of the playoffs, you need both sides of things. The special teams have to be a lot better too, David. But
Yes.
I do think the nice thing is at least how we're sitting here right now with the Chargers draft capital, with what they have as far as salary cap for free agency, we're still sitting here thinking that there's a chance the Chargers can do enough right things for them to be a playoff contender, a playoff favorite, even a team that should absolutely make the playoffs, and a Super Bowl contender. Like, that is on the table. The Chargers are not
Oh
that
yeah.
far away.
No, they're definitely not. I think the Chargers can comfortably say that they are one of the teams that they have the resources and ability to overhaul this team enough or correct their mistakes to put them immediately in the conversation for one of the best teams in the NFL, and a team that would be vying for a Super Bowl championship. But they have a lot of work that needs to be done. We already talked about bolstering the defensive line. They also got to fix the right side of the offensive line. We think they really are missing an explosive speed threat. They need to add pass rushers. I'm glad you brought up the special teams unit, because that's one thing that hasn't even been average for the Chargers for the last 5 years. And I think if they are able to make significant corrections on defense, get an average special teams unit, and just tweak a couple things on offense, this is a team nobody wants to play against. And if they get into the tournament, they're extraordinarily dangerous.
Well, and I mean, it goes to some of the things we've heard from guys like Justin Herbert and Brandon Staley, right? Specifically, just saying, like, hey, we beat both the teams in the AFC Championship game.
Yep.
Like, we know that we can compete and with any team on any given Sunday. It's finding that consistency. And I
Yes.
do think that maybe we overvalued Brandon Staley, but we also probably overvalued how good of the guys on the defense were, right? Some of those guys
Yeah.
on the defense were, and the leaps that some guys would make, like Jerry Tillery or Kenneth Murray, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think that, and I mean, Chris Harris Jr. and how we thought he would be better. And like, so there was a lot that we kind of misread going into last season,
Sure.
but there's a lot of ways the Chargers, especially with what they have in front of them and the, flexibility that they have in this offseason, to put a contending team out there. So I do think, obviously, it's too soon to say that the Chargers are close to a Super Bowl team right
Yeah,
now, not
definitely.
knowing what they're going to do in free agency and in the draft. But we can say there's absolutely a scenario where the Chargers come out of this offseason feeling like they're in contention in the AFC West to at least compete, maybe not beat the Chiefs, but be competitive with them, and also be a playoff team that could potentially be more just like the Bengals were, who signed big free agents in the offseason, like a Trey Hendrickson, like a DJ Reader, traded for a BJ Hill. You know what I mean? So it's like they made the moves. Rams made the moves. Chargers can make some moves that'll have that impact, but they have to hit on everything. And that's
And
the other
hopefully
big thing.
they do, because Daniel, I want to be on Radio Row next year when the Chargers are in the Super Bowl. I want it to be
Def-
me and you out there
no.
interviewing our favorite athletes and our favorite media members, because the Chargers are back in the Super Bowl for the first time in, what is it, 25 years? So yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
the
hoping.
Chargers are close to being considered, contenders, but at the same time, like everything's gonna have to go right for the Chargers. They
Definitely.
can't have a lot of big swings and misses, and the Super Bowl is definitely their ceiling. But what is the floor as we see it right now, especially with the Chargers' talented group of young players that we know that they have? And also, should the Chargers add a trench player early on, or should they go with a skill player, something that Tom Telesco loves to do? And what can the Chargers do to get more deep passes from Justin Herbert? Are they not throwing the ball deep enough? I know a very common frustration with the fans. So we're going to get into that coming up right after this. But first, I need to tell you guys about an incredible app that everyone who buys gas needs to know about: Get Upside. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free, and you guys can start saving money today. And since you listen to this podcast, you guys can also put in the promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents or more per gallon on your first visit. That means you guys, all you have to do, touchdown, all caps, with the free Get Upside app, and you're saving at least 25 cents or more on your first fill up. I mean, taking those numbers off the gas prices make them much more stomachable, I can tell you for sure, especially as someone who lives in California. But if you're a rideshare driver, food delivery driver, you can save hundreds of dollars a year just with the Get Upside app. I mean, you're getting the gas anyways. Get the app that's going to save you money, and there's no downside to it. You can get the money straight into your bank account. You can get it through PayPal. You can also get it in Amazon and other big branded gift cards as well. And make sure you guys go download the free Get Upside app. Use the promo code TOUCHDOWN so you can save 25 cents or more per gallon on your first fill up. I also need to tell you guys about betonline.net, the official betting sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast, because BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the playoffs, and we're only a couple of days away for the big game from the big game. But David, this is a great weekend for sports betting in general, because there's also a huge UFC fight. I mean, we got Israel Adesanya and Bobby Knuckles fighting for a championship with Derek Lewis, another heavyweight bomber that's going to be throwing. And then you have the big game right after that, and you want to go to the best place that has all the props, all the different odds, the best odds and lines that you're going to find. BetOnline.net is where you guys are going to want to be this weekend. It's not too late to get your money in now, because this is one of the best betting weekends, maybe the best betting weekend of the year, right? Maybe March Madness, which you should also go to BetOnline for. That's a huge betting weekend. But as far as big quality events, this weekend, I think, takes the cake, and there's only one place to go. It's betonline.net, but it's not just football. It's not just UFC. You can go basketball. You can go hockey. There's a ton of other things, even your favorite Vegas casino games, because BetOnline is the only place where you guys want to go for all of your sports wagering. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, David, what is Fan Mail Friday? And we did want to get into our little Super Bowl thing, but we also wanted to turn the show over to the fans as well. And of course, guys, hey, every Friday we're going to be trying to do this for you guys throughout the week. Feel free to tag us. Feel free to, ask us anything you want, or call into the voicemail line. The number is 323-524-7924. If you guys do it throughout the week, you will get on Friday's show. But
On any of our social media platforms, hit us up on any of them, and we will make sure to get the question on the show.
yeah, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram. We have a Locked On Chargers Facebook page, at Locked On LAC on Twitter. But today, David, we do have a good question from Dalton Grover on Twitter, who says, without knowing the free agent signings to come later, where do you see this team's floor being for next season realistically? Loving the show. Yeah, I added the loving the show part. It's not part of the question, but he said it, so I wasn't going to,
Yeah,
not
we always
put his
appreciate the
exact quote out there.
compliments.
All right, David. Well, we talked about the ceiling. The ceiling's obviously being a Super Bowl team, but the floor is a different question. I think for this, David, we will put out, just that this is the floor for the Chargers with Justin Herbert, because obviously
Yeah.
you lose your starting quarterback, all bets are off. It's impossible to say how well a team is going to do. But if Justin Herbert stays healthy, David, what do you think this Chargers team's floor is with the players that they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at this Chargers team, we know that there's some deficiencies and some flaws, but don't make any mistakes. This is still an incredibly talented team, and they can beat. They already demonstrated that they can beat anyone on any given Sunday. So I think what they've been missing is that consistent part of it. So just based on the players that they have right now, I think a 500 record is probably, the bottom level there. I don't think that with Justin Herbert in, the driver's seat where he is in his career, where he's only going to get better, I think that they're not going to do much worse than that.
Yeah, well, unfortunately in the NFL now, you can't finish 500, right? Because the 17 games definitely
Right.
throws
Yes.
throws a wrench
Within
into
one
things.
within one
I get
win.
around
Yeah.
500. I get
Yeah,
it. But
around 500.
8
Yes.
and 9, 9 and 8. I'd probably tend to agree with you. I mean, it would be hard just because of the players that are coming back next season,
Yeah.
right? You know that Rashawn Slater, Matt Filer, Corey Lindsley are going to be there. You know Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen are going to be there, right? You know Joey Bosa, Derwin James, Sunday Samuel Jr., Michael Davis. You know all those guys are going to be out there as of right now before the Chargers make any moves. So I think with those elite players, even if you don't have enough of them, even if you don't have enough good players, with that core, it's hard to imagine if you have those guys that you're losing or, having a season where you win 4 games or something like that, unless
Yeah,
it's
I
just
don't
like a
see it.
total, misjustice of like miscarriage of justice coaching wise, right? You'd have to pull out some crazy, Anthony Lynn endings to games to do something like that and to be that bad, especially most importantly with Justin Herbert as a quarterback. But that
Yeah.
brings us to our next Twitter question from T Han or Han Sports on Twitter. And they ask, is bolstering the trenches more important than bettering the skill player depth for the Chargers? And also, how do you think Lombardi can better utilize Herbert's arm talent? 10 through for 5,000 yards, but it sure didn't feel like we pushed the ball downfield as much as we could have with his arm. So let's attack this Justin Herbert question first, Dave, because I do know this was something that was a big time, fan discussion, just people talking about the Chargers not going deep enough. Don't make Justin Herbert playing Drew Brees', tiny arm offense that Joe Lombardi brought. That's what one of the biggest things was, right? As
T-Rex
far as
arm. Yeah.
yeah, but what do you think the Chargers can do, David? Or do you think that they weren't throwing the ball deep enough? Do you think it has to be more?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually a pretty simple fix. I mean, just not getting too technical. They just need to throw the ball more on first and second down. I think that's a huge emphasis. They need to stop being so committed to those early down runs, those first down, those second. It seemed like at some point in the season last year, it was almost automatic on a second down that they were running the football. Like there just wasn't any kind of creativity on that. So I just think if they're able to get the ball in his hands more so on those early downs, I think that's one of the easiest ways to get the ball in the air more for Justin Herbert and get the ball down the field.
So let's look at the numbers, just to see where he's at. So as far as intended air yards per attempt, which is basically how far his receivers are that he's targeting on these throws, so how deep they are.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert was 15th or 18th in intended air yards. That's not very high, right? Either way, when you look at the top 5 in that position, though, it's Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Baker Mayfield. So it's not necessarily a direct correlation of just because
Yeah.
you're throwing deep doesn't mean you're the best quarterbacks.
Right.
For, just to compare it, he was right behind Aaron Rodgers, who's the NFL MVP, and he was a few spots, 6 spots exactly ahead of Patrick Mahomes, who obviously had another great season. As far as that goes, that's not really something that bothers you just because, the Chargers see so much cover 2 with Justin Herbert's big arm that is one of the ways you can beat it. At the
Yeah.
same time, it doesn't mean you can't throw the ball deep more because Patrick Mahomes, even with a much lower average depth of target, was still taking way more deep shots than Justin Herbert was. According to PFF, Justin Herbert was 15th in deep passing attempts behind Taylor Heineke, right? And he had a lot more total passing attempts than Taylor Heineke. So that's a problem, right? He was behind Big Ben, which, is also pretty tough to look at too. And as well as, behind some other people as well. He was right next to Mac Jones. Yeah, next to Mac Jones, which is not somewhere I think you should be if you're Justin Herbert and have that arm. I think one of the things is, Justin Herbert has to have a little bit better anticipation over the middle, especially against that cover 2, hitting that deep post up the seam or just a deep in route where you're getting those 20 plus yards on those type of completions. I think he has to anticipate a little bit better because there were some openings there.
Yeah,
But you
maybe
can
lead the
also add
receiver
some
a little
more
more,
speed
right?
for sure. But I think it's also, it's tough to lead people that much in the middle of the field because if you're
Right.
going too far in either direction over the middle of the field, there's layers of players. So it's more
Yeah.
people that could potentially intercept it. But yeah, it's just not waiting, and seeing the person get open and having to
Yeah.
anticipate they're going to be open if he just makes the right throw. And we saw a lot of that too, and he's getting better
Sure.
at that, which is the
Yeah.
promising thing. But I think obviously adding more speed never hurt as well, because Jalen Guyton, I don't think, is a guy that you necessarily are seeing get wide open because he's burning dudes down the field so fast. Not that you need that to be a deep passing team, but it helps. And it also helps, to get more yards after the catch and have, if you're going to run that short route kind of offense, to get guys who can do more with it, because that's not what the Chargers specialty was. But let's get to the other one here, David. Trenches or skill position player? I know which way you're going.
You're damn right you know which way I'm going, because I've said it on this show and on every show that we've done together over the last 6 years. I am always in favor of investing in the spine of the team. Always. It's always the trenches first. The Chargers have had an opposite philosophy. It took them pretty much up until last year for them to put any kind of serious commitment or resources into the offensive line. They still have work to do. They still need to add to the offensive line. They still need to add to the defensive line. The Chargers tried that other approach of adding the skill players first. That didn't work. So they definitely need to change course. It's always about reinforcing and bolstering and adding talent to the spine of the team. That is the best way to go for the Chargers.
I mean, I guess it's how you look at it, because I think if you're having edge rushers be trenches players, then it is, right? If you're having them be outside linebackers, then, now it's a skill position player. So I think that's all semantics. But for the sake of this conversation, edge rushers are trenches players. I mean, you need a lot at edge to help Joey Bosa, and you also need a lot at defensive tackle as well. But at the same time, one really good corner can change things for your entire defense potentially. You know what I mean? So there are arguments, I think, for both sides. I think with the Chargers specifically, last year they focused on the offensive line. 3 of their biggest pieces of capital in their offseason last year they used on offensive linemen. Multi-year deal for Matt Filer, $20+ million. Corey Linsley, highest paid center in the league. Rashawn Slater, first pick in the draft for the Chargers at 13th overall. So that's 3 huge pieces of capital. If the Chargers put that and invest that into their defensive front, I think that would dramatically improve it. I don't think that's how it's going to go down, but you get what I'm saying. I mean, I think that is where you have to think it's most important. But we do have another segment to get into here, because we do have a few more questions on Fan Mail Friday. That always goes long. It has to go long. That's just kind of what we do around here. It never goes short. We're never going to cheat you out of the show. That's 100%. But coming up next, we'll be getting into if the Chargers should move up in the draft. A lot of people talking about moving down. We're the only ones talking about moving up, but we'll get into that. I need to tell you guys first, though, about my favorite protein bar, Built Bar. You guys know it's my favorite protein bar. I talk about it all the time. You just can't make something taste good. Something either tastes good or it doesn't. A lot of protein bars don't taste good. Built Bars taste great. And there's a ton of flavors to choose from. Cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, mint brownie. Most of the bars have 17 grams of protein and 4 grams of sugar and 4 grams of carbs or less. You're not going to find a better bang for your buck. And it also tastes great, and it's 100% covered in chocolate. But have you tried the puffs? That's what's important right now. Have you tried the Built Bar Puffs? It's a new kind of Built Bar. They're kind of slept on right now, but you're talking about cinnamon churro as a flavor and other really, really good flavors. Banana cream pie you can get as a Built Puff. It's the first ever protein-infused marshmallow inside of it, covered in 100% real chocolate. Doesn't get much better than that to go along with all the other great flavors, but you guys can get a mix box and try a bunch of different Built Bar flavors. They're all great. You will find your favorite one, and you can even save some money. Since you listen to the show, if you go to Built.com, you can use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, David, let's continue this Fan Mail Friday. And Super Week is brought to you by Get Upside. Make sure you guys check out all of the Locked On shows that are at Radio Row right now. We'll be there next year when the Chargers are in the Super Bowl. But Locked On Rams, Locked On Bengals, Locked On NFL, doing big things, big interviews going on right now. But David, we have some more fan mail questions to get into. And of course, you guys can hit us up at Locked On LAC. You can hit up the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 or any of our social media. But let's get into the first question here, David, talking about the Chargers moving up in the draft. So we have Charles Dawkins, who is actually a YouTube comment, who asks, should the Chargers move up in the draft for an elite player at a position of need, a shutdown DB, or an edge guy? So, David, I will open up the floor to you and see what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you ponder this question, you have to consider, just the history of the general manager. Is this something that he would do as opposed to trading back? It is actually something that Tom Telesco has shown that he would do.
Well, and this is also should, not will. You know what I
Right.
mean? So, yeah, that's on you. Do you think they should?
Yeah, do I think they should? I think it's a little bit too early to figure out how the board's going to shake up and who's going to be available and who's going to be there. But I'm always, if you have that conviction on a guy you feel like is the perfect spot, a guy who's going to come in and make that immediate impact that you're looking for, then yeah, I'm okay with it for sure. I mean, the Chargers have a plethora of draft capital right now. I think I wouldn't be opposed to them being aggressive, because that just signifies a change in their philosophy. And I would like a more aggressive nature in everything that they do, because this is a front office that hasn't done enough in the 10 years that they've been in place.
I agree with the mentality part of it. I mean, I get that, but like you also have to think about that. I'm pretty sure I'm thinking about this off the top of my head, but the last three players the Chargers have traded up for, the last one with Kenneth Murray. So they were very convinced in that. That's not working out so well.
No,
The one before that, Melvin Gordon. Another
yeah,
one, hard to
no,
feel good about that moving up in the first round, using more
yeah,
draft capital. The other one I could think of off the top of my head, Jeremiah Tauchu. So not necessarily the best resume for Tom Telesco in those situations where he's moving up in the draft. And I think in this draft class specifically, you do not move up. This is definitely a trade down class
yeah,
because there's
go
no
back.
consensus top 10. There's no consensus guys that you feel like you can just bring in. They're automatically going to change your team. Like you're talking about edge rushers and cornerbacks. A Kayvon Thibodeau is not going to fall to number 10, right? And if you're trying to trade up past 10 from 17 past 10, you're talking about future first round picks. And I
Yeah,
don't think there's anybody in this draft class, right? Unless you're moving up to like number one, number two, something like that, that you would ever trade another first round pick to move up for anybody, especially since you don't need a quarterback. So that's not on
right.
the table, right? So I think, especially with this draft class, you feel like you're not sure any of these guys are the guy, but you feel like there's going to be a good guy when the 17th pick comes up. But
Yeah,
might not necessarily be the in cement, for sure prospect that you think that you feel really, really good about. So I don't see a trade up. I think it's definitely a trade down type of draft, just with the way it's playing out so far. But hey, man,
yeah,
me and David are still looking at maybe there is some dude where we're like, hey, go get it. One of the guys would be probably Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati, the corner, just with the size. Pretty great prospect. So, like, I mean, maybe you try if he falls into the teens or something, you want to get up ahead of the Eagles so have some similar needs as you. Maybe I could, get behind something like that if you're that sure of it, but it's hard to say, and I'll have to watch more on him to kind of determine that. But let's get to the next one here from Tony James, who hit me up on Twitter and asked who will have the most influence on this in this upcoming draft, Tom Telesco or Brandon Staley. So, David, I think we might have a different answer on this.
yeah, I think we do actually. And I think it's based for me off of how the offseason went last year with Brandon Staley kind of there as the head man in charge. I think, the role or the job of the general manager is to get the players that the head coach wants, and the players that are going to work in his system. So I think this is probably more of a hope as well, but I hope that Brandon Staley has more influence on the type of players that they want to draft and they want to bring in house, because ultimately he's the guy that has to be the mad scientist and take all the pieces and put them together to where they work the best way. And so I'm hoping that it is Brandon Staley being the one that is really orchestrating this symphony.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just I think it's simple. I think it's Tom Telesco. He's the general manager. He's going to be the one that gets the final say on these things. I mean, I think Brandon Staley has had a big influence on it, and I think even when you go back to Anthony Lynn and you look at a guy like Kenneth Murray, who
Yeah,
Anthony Lynn said, he walked in the room, we decided we're going to trade up from, trade a third round pick to go up to get him. So
yeah,
like we've seen how much of an influence the coach has, and I think having Brandon Staley is a positive influence on Tom Telesco. But I still think that there's still certain things with Tom Telesco where we haven't seen him totally change his stripes yet. Like there's still a
it's
lot
true.
of Tom Telesco tendencies that are going on, and we only have one draft class to look at in an
Right.
incredibly small sample size. So I do think there were some very Brandon Staley draft, assets. And like it's hard because it's like was going on offensive line Tom Telesco, who hadn't done it, in the 8 seasons leading up to last season? Or was it Brandon Staley, a defensive coach, who's saying, hey, we need to get more on the offensive line? So like it's hard to always kind of give credit, because to find out how it's going to be going forward, you have to know exactly kind of how it was in the past. So I think Brandon Staley has a big influence on it, and we see it with the type of players they bring in. But to say he has more than the general manager who's going to make that final call, I don't know. That to me, even if you hope so, it's hard to believe that. But I do think
Yeah.
that he has a big influence on it. One more question here, David. It wasn't even a question. It was from Chris on Twitter, who just says, guess the number one unrestricted free agent. So, David, There's a lot of ways you could take that, but I think it's, the number one target. If the Chargers have one target or maybe the most likely one, where would you go with it? Guess the number one UFA.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a guy I've mentioned on several different occasions, and I'm going to stick with it. It's J.C. Jackson. I think J.C. Jackson would be a phenomenal pick if you add him to this Chargers defense, along with Derwin James and Michael Davis, and just some of the already insane athletes and assets that they already have in place. If you add that dude who's in the peak of his career, coming off of 17 picks in the last couple of seasons, I think that would be insane to add to this Chargers defense.
Yeah, I'm only laughing because it's like literally you could go so many different ways with this not question and comment from Chris on Twitter. I mean, like,
You
guess
really
the
can.
number
Yeah.
one UFA. Is it the first one? I mean, I think the most likely one, going back to, a zebra not changing their stripes, is Tom Telesco bringing in a veteran defensive tackle like Akeem Hicks, right?
Yeah.
But usually something like, I mean, we saw it with Brandon Mebane, right? We saw it with Limbaugh Joseph. He just seems like the heir to the throne. But if
Yeah.
you're going early in free agency, if it's the first free agent, usually those veteran, especially defensive tackle contracts are not going to happen on day 1 or 2 when all the splash signings are going to happen. So I think if you are hearing the Chargers in those first couple of days, it's someone like a Darius Williams, and they go
Yeah.
all in. I don't know if they're going to go for J.C. Jackson, even though I wish that they would. But I think if they were to make a splash signings, it would probably be somewhere in the range of Darius Williams as opposed to potentially making someone the highest paid player at their position. I don't know if the Chargers are going to do that 2 years in a row, but they did it last year and surprised us
You
there
can
with Corey
dream.
Linsley. I mean, we all knew it made so much sense last year. Like last year, Corey Linsley was the dude that made too much sense. The year
Yeah.
before that, the dude that made way too much sense was Brian Bulaga. This year, the dude that makes way too much sense is Akeem Hicks. But if it's not, maybe it's a Darius Williams, a Sebastian Joseph Day, right? Continuing to add to those trenches like they prioritized it in the offseason of 2021. But I'm excited, David. There's so much excitement for sure, especially with
Yes.
the Super Bowl. I mean, knowing the Chargers beat one of those teams and knowing the Chargers are going to have the Rams next year on their schedule. Oh, I'm excited for it. And I'm excited for you guys to be back here with us on Monday because guess what? We don't care that much about the Rams and the Bengals. So it's still going to be
Nah.
mock draft Monday on Monday. And we'll get into a few more first round draft picks that we could, potentially usurp our favorites so far out of the 6 that we've been looking at extensively. So we'll get into that on Monday to make sure you don't miss it. Go subscribe to the new Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. And you can always find us on social media as well to ask the questions for the next Fan Mail Friday. Hit us up at Locked On LAC on Twitter. You can also find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalk SD. And we'll put another show post out in the week, but you guys can hit us up anytime or on the Locked On Chargers voicemail line at 323-524-7924. Everyone have fun at their Super Bowl parties this weekend and think and dream about the Chargers potentially getting there in 2022. But we'll be back on Monday with Mock Draft Monday. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.